All right, so welcome everyone to Monday equals MC squared. So I'm doing it right. And today is February 8th, and Chris will be joining us shortly. So welcome everyone for coming on. And I've been thinking about what to talk about because we wanted to focus on the heart. But then a lot of different questions been coming. So I will be addressing, felt like everything but the kitchen sink kind of a day. So we'll probably go through all that. But why don't we, since I had a kind of a busy morning already, why don't we ground ourselves a little bit? And coming back to your breath. Whatever you're doing, if you could stop multitasking for a moment. And as you start to notice your breath, see if you could notice the beginning of your breath, midway, and the end of your breath. And then breathing out, same thing, beginning of your exhale, midway through in your exhale, and then end of your exhale. And see, pause for a moment after you go through those 3 stages, and then moving on to the next breath again on your own. So the only thing you're paying attention to right now is the beginning, middle, and the end of your inhales and your exhales. Beginning, middle, and the end. And just take a little pause before you begin again to either the inhales or your exhales. Stay with it. If you start to drift, coming back to where's my beginning, middle, and the end. And when you can start to notice that, your breath becomes so precious, doesn't it? And you may also notice that when you don't pay attention to the beginning, middle, and the end, you might be just prematurely finishing up your inhales before you're going into the exhales, or you don't fully exhale before you enter into your inhale. So see if you could create this rhythmic breath that you're aware of the beginning and midway through and the end. Noticing your belly, softening your belly. Maybe 2 more rounds of your breaths, going from the beginning, middle, and the end. Oh, it was so delicious. Let's do it one more. And this time, really pause at the end of your exhale. Good. And placing your hands on your lap, press your thighs down and see if you could press your thighs up towards your hands so you're connected to your lower body. And then release your arms, hands, and then relax your legs. Let's do that again. Press into each other. So hands and thighs pressing towards each other. Know that you are in this body. And then go ahead and relax. Relaxing your legs and your hands. Roll your shoulders to the back a couple of times. Raising your shoulders up towards your ears and then drop them. And then again, reaching up, your shoulders up and drop. I'm going to try to find and mute people. Okay, let's go ahead and bring up one more time. And release. Okay, making sure your hands are relaxed too. Okay, I'll talk a lot about the hands and the importance of this in my course, but I think we don't give our hands enough credit for all that's doing for us. Okay. All right. How did that feel for all of you? Because I don't think it's just me that the February is a mixed bag. Has it been for all of you? There are moments of like beauty and joy, and then there are moments of like sheer frustrations. That's kind of what I'm experiencing, and they sometimes marble together, and I'm going, okay, it's like I need to ground myself. I need to come back to this. So I'm curious what's been going on. And I think the beginning, middle, and end idea with the breath is very grounding. So I'm wondering if that felt good. Yeah, it felt good. You've summed up my February as well. Right? So we're all in this together because it just feels moment by moment. I suppose that you can say that about it every day, all the time, but I've been feeling that a lot. So, all right. So yeah, if you have any other thoughts, let me know. But I wanted to share, Chris will probably chime in when he can get on, but I'm sure you have been paying attention to someone, maybe some of you don't watch news, but the news about the Alexei, right? Navalny. I hope I'm saying that his name correctly, but he's been sentenced to 2.5 years in Russian jail again. But I'm sure you know about all that's going on in Russia right now with so much demonstrations, things, and thousands of, at least hundreds of people in the thousands now being, put to jail, or at least they've been arrested for doing demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations in many cases. But I don't know any of you saw when he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. He, in the courthouse, he was behind this glass door, like his cage kind of a thing. And he drew a heart with his finger up against the glass. And when I read that, I Googled it because I wanted to see it, and I didn't realize it. It was something that a lot of people had watched on YouTube. And he also created a heart shape with his hands too, to his wife and then to his supporters. And I thought, tears started to come down for me. I just thought, do I have that level of, I thought, courage to withstand what he's been put through already, being poisoned, but also now he's going to be behind bars for that many years. And so I started thinking about love for this, because he was clearly expressing his love for his wife and his supporters. But to me, it was incredible level of courage that he was showing. And I don't know, it was a very painful thing for me to watch too. So I just wondered if any of you watched that or saw that or heard about it, and if meant anything to any of you. So if If you have something to share, please let me know. So, I know I don't blame you, Maria, for not watching the news. And I don't watch news either. This was something I heard it on NPR and it intrigued me. So I did. But I wondered if this is something that, we can, well, Chris is on, so I will make him a host too. But if I have that kind of a courage inside me to do that, and I don't need to know the answer really. It just, I just wanted to ask that question to myself. And I know Chris has things he wanted to share about this too, so I'll make him a co-host right now.
So yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I did not see you.
No, that's okay. I just came in hot from another meeting. So
did you hear anything that I was talking about that?
And I wanted just to jump in on this question of courage, because I mean, courage has often been described as the foremost of our qualities, because so many other things hang on that. So many things about navigating change or doing things that are difficult that we didn't ask for, but they're here nonetheless. And part of the reason that the topic of courage came up, and Alexei Navalny he's a pretty bold example. We've seen other ones in the past, people like Nelson Mandela that have been imprisoned just as prisoners of conscience. And so he's representing a new generation of that for us. But that the courage of conviction, the courage of standing steadfast, the courage of going up against, a massive authoritarian government like Russia, and standing as one little person, even though he has all these supporters, he still has to be the face of it. And he has to experience what that impact is on his personal life and his personal body, his mind, his experience. All of that is potentially in jeopardy, and he knows that. And so I have this quote sitting in front of me from Oliver Wendell Holmes. And he said, courage is about doing what you're afraid to do. Okay, courage is about doing what you're afraid to do. There can be no courage unless you're scared. So just think about that. There can be no courage unless you're scared. And he says, have the courage to act instead of react. Okay, have the courage to act instead of react. And react is what we do so much of the time. We're conditioned to react, biologically conditioned. We're culturally, socially conditioned. There are all of these hidden, unspoken rules that govern everything about our day-to-day lives that we all, in some ways, are subject to. And so this topic of courage, and even the larger question of, what are we doing here on these calls? Why are we gathering here? I imagine in my life, I imagine I'm gathering here with all of you because there's some interest in seeing where we can move to. How can we develop ourselves more deeply? How can we see more of what's really here beyond just what's in our minds and our imaginations? So courage at its core, and even the word core has the same root, as it turns out, but they both come from that old French word for heart, the cœur. And I apologize if anybody speaks French and I mangled it. But that word for heart, basically, when we're living with coming from courage, we are coming from our hearts. We're coming from the center of our being. We're coming from the place where the wisdom that's there is beyond our words and our brains and our cleverness. It's the part of us that always understands what is needed. And we have to allow ourselves to have a space so that we can respond and not just have a knee-jerk reaction. So connecting with what is in our hearts and what our hearts are responding to naturally requires us to pull back and be still and listen. So why don't we just continue that listening to your heart for just a moment. I'm going to take this in a somewhat of a guided direction here for a moment. And that is, I want you to call up a time. It could be recent, it could be a long time ago, it could even be from childhood. But I want you to think of a time when you were afraid, unmistakably afraid, terrified of what to do. Maybe it was so frightening that you couldn't even think about what to do at that moment. But as you're feeling that experience, which is now in the past, so you're safe from it in that sense, I want to remind you of that because some of our past experiences are, in fact, traumas, and recalling them can feel like we're reliving them. But we're here now. So, in this past experience where you were afraid, was there something that happened? Was there somebody present? Maybe it was even you yourself that said something or reminded you of something that helped you to move past it. And what was that? What was the quality of that intervention, let's call it, that helped you to navigate out of the fear and move forward again? So Lao Tzu, the alleged writer of the Tao Te Ching and other works, one of his lines is, "From caring comes courage." And so as you're thinking about that situation and you're giving it a little bit of care right now, you're kind of nurturing that. I want you to think about, how did you grow past that? Did it cause you to avoid similar situations? Did it cause you to repeat the pattern of being afraid? Or did it cause you to have a bit of what's called in psychology post-traumatic growth, where the adversity itself challenged you to move in a new direction? And Joanne said, it's actually a moment of surrender that allowed me to move past it and then summon the courage to move through a boating accident. So it could be a very traumatic thing like that. I've spoken of what it was, one of my injuries and accidents that I had, but it was a very serious one. It was one that changed the course of my life. And there was a real moment of fear, terror, actually, of almost seeing my life ending for just a few moments. But there, just like Joanne just said, there was a moment where that passed, and there was an acceptance of, number one, that that reality was unfolding. I was in the course of going into what was going to be a very serious injury, and I couldn't stop it. And so accepting that that was what was happening allowed me to some extent to relax into it, and perhaps even to reduce the extent of the injuries. But I want you to think about this now going into the present tense, where we are right now, and feeling which way you turn. Did you turn away from the fear that came after that early fear that you had? Did you develop a habit of staying clear of frightening things, dangerous things, or moving through them, surrendering to what's happening? And however you've done it, it's not a right or wrong. It's just something to bring to mind what happens now when you face fear. What is the feeling that comes up? Because when we can't face the fear, we have this inward trembling that happens, and we call it anxiety sometimes, or worry. I want you to just connect with yourself and feel, how do you approach things that are unknown to you? We've spent a lot of time in these last few weeks talking about the unknown. And fear of the unknown is often counted as one of the most frightening of all things, and yet it's everywhere. Unknown is all around us all the time. And so coming back to courage, I want to remind you, you're all here because you have survived every one of those challenges up to this point. Maybe not to the extent you would have liked. Maybe there are lingering effects that are still impacting your life. But whatever they are, you're here. You're here right now. And to get here has required a certain amount of resilience and courage. But I want to call courage to mind now from a conscious place. Again, we don't want to react. We want to act. We want to have awareness of what we're doing. So I think I'm riffing on courage here, and I'd like to open it up to others and hear what you have to say. You can share your thoughts in the chat about maybe some ways that you have been able to access that inner courage, that heart power that allows us to stand in the place of the unknown, which is naturally a fearful place for us, and still persist and still move through it.
Well, Chris, I'm going to chime in a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
I see courageous people every day in my practice, because by the time they find me in my work, they have been to, I would say, even on average, 10 different practitioners. So anywhere from 10 to 15 practitioners. And you have to have a tremendous amount of energy and courage, I would say, and faith and trust in yourself that you have the healing power in you to be able to do that. So I encounter courageous people every single day, despite and because of, and all of the above that made them look for another way to heal, or another way to come back to the wholeness, which is the health means wholeness. And, I wanted to bring up early on, I did not get a chance to read Maria's comment, but sounds like she's been going through pretty difficult times right now. And she said, how can I get medical care, mental, physically, in a abandonment medical system that I keep getting abused and abandoned in, energetically to clear? I have tried repeatedly to get psych support and not happening. told to try medication by intuitively, but claimed fully loved, supported by universe, but can't breathe, so tense and little joy. And then looks like she went to see a doctor, and then they didn't want to see her, and so on and so forth. So it's just, you're first of all a very courageous human being to continue on this journey, and don't give up. I think that's what I felt when I googled, I'm hoping that I'm saying his name correctly, but Alexei Navalny. When I saw him draw the heart and hold the heart in the courtroom where he knows where he's headed, but he still had the courage and the love, really. I mean, just pure love beaming out of him. And he's doing this not just for him and his family, but he's courageously stepping into a very difficult sentence like that, because he believes in a higher purpose. So, I just wanted to tell you, Maria, that you're very courageous for working on this. And, I think don't give up. You may need different support than just the medical systems, but don't give up. Keep moving forward with it. Okay, keep looking, keep feeling it in your heart, what's the right path for you, because it'll appear for you. And Chris and I always talk about this, but our goal isn't to become 100% better. That's not the goal. Our goal is to become whole, even despite and because of our scar tissues and our breakages, and to know that you're not broken. So I hope that seems paradoxical, but I hope you can feel that we all have scars. We all have had breakages, but we're not broken human beings. So, I think Chris and I have always said that Chris and I are like a misfit toys that found each other. And we like it. We like that we're misfit toys, that we get to explore that side of who we are and still love one another fully. So I don't know, do you have any encouragement for Maria, honey?
I do, and I would start with, some of these things are so repeated that they've lost some of maybe their value or meaning, yet they're extremely practical. And one of them is this idea of starting from where you are. And I want to just say that whatever the situation may be, the first step that any of us can do is to acknowledge, this is the situation. This is the reality that I'm in. We don't have to like it. We don't have to want it. We just need to be real about what's here. And then once we can do that, it allows us to see more rather than just resist what's happening. It allows us to see more of what's available to us. And little by little, things that we may not have even noticed before, things that we might have just been unaware of, or we ruled them out as possibilities, start to reveal themselves to us. And one of the things that happens is, if you have been somebody that has experienced traumas, multiple traumas, complex traumas over a lifetime, this can be very, very difficult to unwind. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of courage and energy and other people to help you. Honestly, it's not something that you can pull out of by yourself. And I'm not going to say who those people are for you. It could be so many different kinds of people. But one of the things that happens to us is that when we go through these traumas, we essentially, our nervous system and our brain start getting used to the experience of loss and fear and frustration and getting stuck and not moving forward. And as those patterns become deepened in our system and repeated frequently, we get habituated to what is called psychologically, it's called learned helplessness. And that sounds like a really negative term. And, in education, I spent the first decade of my career as an educator and a school administrator. And we often use this term in a negative way, but that's not really necessarily what it means. It's a reality check. So if you have found yourself in this place where maybe when we did that little practice, if you want to call it that I guided us through, just to go back and look at some of the frightening or fearful situations that you've had and how you navigated that. If you felt really like you wanted to pull back in yourself and you felt stuck, or it started to churn up some new content that's happening right now, it's very difficult to take in new things. This whole thing about doing things differently, that's what we are always talking about, is moving differently. Because if we want to have different experiences, we have to stop doing things in the same ways. We can't keep repeating the same things and expecting different outcomes. That's what got us to whatever things that we're struggling with right now, whether it's with our health or if it's mental health, relationships, whatever it might be. So what I would encourage as a practical thing to do is to set very, very small micro goals for yourself. And it might even be by the minute. It could be that small. If you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning, you might need to say to yourself, today, I'm going to set a goal of getting out of bed and getting dressed. That might sound strange to some of you, but those of you that have experienced deep depression or extreme stages of burnout, you know what I'm talking about. That's actually sometimes an insurmountable goal. But if you can set small goals for yourself like this throughout your day, forget about the big ones, forget about transforming my life and changing everything about who I am and having a new experience with money and relationships and all that. Start with what is calling to you from your life. And I'm speaking at an extreme example here. Okay, this is somebody who's dealing with some really long-term complex things that have really drained them of their energy and resources. But everybody can take something from this, of setting a small goal. And the purpose of setting the small goal and attaining it is that each time you do that, you're retraining your brain and your nervous system to expect success, not failure. And this is a really important task to change anything in your life, to change direction, and to have a different experience. And did you want to say something to that? There was a question that came up earlier from, it had to do with the some comments that I'd made on a previous call about holding the shadow for your family. And some of you may have been on that call and remember that, but that was a conversation. I'm not going to try to remember the entire.
We can get into that next time too. If
Yeah,
you
I
don't
just
mind.
wanted to say a quick comment on that, which is to Cynthia. She asked, what are the pros and cons of holding the shadow for your family? And the context of that was I had mentioned that as the result of being severely injured, a friend of mine who's a 35-year psychotherapist said this to me. And he said, you're holding the shadow of your family. You're the one that is essentially standing in for brokenness. And so pros, I would say, let me start with the dangers. So maybe it's easier to do this. The danger of this, and this becomes a con, is that you identify with that. You identify with the shadow. You identify with being the broken one. And when you do that, it's very difficult not to be that. So that will have an impact on your health and your healing process, and also the relationships that you have with those other people in your family strongly, and probably a more negative sense. as far as pros, I would say that when you realize that that's what's happening and that you're essentially standing in where other people aren't having the courage to look in themselves, it gives you an enormous perspective on human nature, on yourself, and on your ability to adapt. And so I think this is a deep question, and there's a lot more that we can investigate here. But let's take a look at what some of the other comments are. And
I think we can go into that some other time. I think archetypes and shadow works are amazing, so we could definitely do that. But I did promise a lot of things because I did everything but the kitchen sink on my Monday today. So I have a lot of things on my agenda. Sorry, honey. But Jamila says, yes, as you said earlier, prioritize one thing, not many. And that's true. So I'm going to do one thing at a time in the kitchen sink right now. And I wanted to mention one thing, what Maria says, I'm constantly seeking education, healers, breath work now, just medical system she's having problems with. So I would say this, Maria, that you can't compartmentalize your wholeness that way. You cannot divide yourself into breathwork, healers, education, and in the medical system. Whoever you decide to work with need to be educated enough about the biology and physiology, and also understands the energy medicine, and also knows the traumas that we carry in our lives. And traumas are not always capital T traumas. We're talking about little t traumas, little paper cuts every day. Somebody that understands that and incorporates the breath work at times, movements at times, supplemental support, and also understands the mental health is never just about the brain issues, but the mental health has so much to do with your digestion and your inability to digest and assimilate your amino acids and to convert certain things into neurotransmitters. So it's not, you cannot compartmentalize and look for pieces. If you want to become a whole system again, you need to look for a practitioner that will mirror that back to you. I hope that makes sense. Because as long as you're looking for pieces, then you are going to have pieces of you separated. But, I'm not interested in pieces of me. I'm interested in the whole, the all of me. So that's what I would recommend, that you don't continue to look for things in sample sizes or buffet style. But I say, go to a restaurant and order the whole course and have it from the beginning to the end and see how the chef has prepared your meal from the beginning to the end. And then someone that understands how they interact with one another, how they harmonize together, how they support each dish going from one to the next. So I hope that helps. Okay. And let's see. And I guess I'm not understand that the med D and apostrophe, not apostrophe, is it what is it? The hyphen cow. I don't know exactly what that means. So I think I'm assuming you're using words like a dis-ease in the same way. But okay, so I'm going to go into questions. Is that okay, Chris? I have vertigo that I wanted to address. Vertigo is something I work with a lot, and I get questions about vertigo a lot, like regularly. And the vertigo and tinnitus, they go often hand in hand also. And so that kind of says a lot too. But those two things are really, really complicated, to be honest. And it doesn't get resolved in a couple weeks, even a couple of months, because you have to go from looking at the structural, what's going on in your sinus cavities, what's your breathing like? Are you breathing through the nostrils? Are there any thiamine deficiencies? That would be B vitamin deficiencies. You have to look at your blood sugar dysregulations, because often like adrenal fatigue, some people might be hypoadrenic, but before you get hypo, you might be hyperadrenic, and you've been pushing and pushing and pushing. And so a couple of things that Chris mentioned, burnout symptoms, or any kind of you just feel exhausted, and compassion fatigue, that can send you into vertigo also. Also calcifications in the body, so you're not digesting foods very well. That can create little crystalline structures inside your ear canal. So we're looking at a lot of different things. So, when people say, I have a vertigo, do you have any ideas? And then maybe other things too that I forgot to mention are food allergies is a big one too, because you have histamine issues that may be happening. Maybe you're allergic to, or you don't do well with the cow dairy, but you continue to eat that. That can cause you inflammation, manganese deficiencies. But it doesn't mean you could just go to a store and say, oh, okay, I'm just going to start taking manganese. It doesn't work like that. But that's the same idea as allopathic medicine, right? You go see a doctor, you give symptoms, and then the doctor will write your prescription. We're doing the same thing in the natural, so-called natural health world. We're just kind of replacing it by giving you, take this, take that kind of a thing. So, I would look into, particularly this person that asked me this question about the vertigo. I would actually, with you, start with the adrenals. I would start with your blood sugar regulations. And that's where I get the strongest yes from, is you're not eating in a way that supports your blood sugar to calm down. So it's like up and down, up and down. And a lot of people say, I eat so well. And I come to find out that they eat nothing but carbohydrates, or they eat and snack all day long. So, when people say I eat well, I shouldn't say I don't believe you, but I need to hear it. I need to understand everything that you eat, when you eat, in order for me to make any recommendations, because what we think is good might not be the right fit for your body right now. Okay, so can I go to the next question? Okay, Chris? Okay. Next one is a question about folate and B12. So, and she had a blood test done, and the folate, so serum folate level was high, like extremely high. And her B12 was also high also. But the B12 and the folate, they kind of go hand in hand also. So when it comes to this, I'm curious if you had your MTHFR tested, the gene mutation tested, because if you have high level folate, number one, I want to know what kind of folate it is that you're taking. Is it methylated folate that is easier for you to conjugate in there? It's, basically it's already conjugated form, or is it just the folic acid that can be problematic for some of us, because 1 out of 3 people have MTHFR, and possibly more for Caucasians. And that's going to cause your liver to not be able to process the folate. Okay. And so often what I see with the folate issues is somebody that is not digesting. So somebody that doesn't have enough stomach acid. And I happen to know that she can't swallow supplements very well. So it's mostly done in a liquid form. So it's hard to give hydrochloric acid to someone like that, right? To help the stomach acid function. So where I would start is making sure that you're getting proteolytic enzymes. Those are the enzymes that will break down any kind of undigested foods in your system. Okay. And so, Chris, will you write that word, proteolytic enzymes? And with the enzymes like this, you can actually open the capsule and put it over your food. So the enzymes will help you to break down the carbohydrates better. And that way, I think it'll help you with the folic acid or, methylated form of folate, so you can conjugate them better, or you can digest them better. So I would look into proteolytic enzymes. Also, when it comes to B12, I see this a lot with the blood test, and some of my clients will send their blood tests, and they'll say, "Look, my blood test shows that I have too much B12." Not so quick, because just because it's high on a blood test does not mean that you're utilizing your B12. And in most cases, you're not. That's why it's high also. So what you want to do is, what am I doing with the B12? How come I'm not digesting or utilizing the B12? So just because the blood test says you're in the range or you're above the range, that doesn't mean you need to actually stop taking B12. You actually need to be taking maybe more of the B12. But in the way that, you do it through liquids, or you do it through sucking on the B12. So you're not taking it. And I'm assuming she is using it more of a liquid or sucking on the B12, but it's the underutilization that is the problem. But if it's being underutilized, that means you need to look at your liver function, number one. I would say castor oil packs is going to be so important for you. Supporting the liver is going to be important, whether it's through bitters or, and I'm saying most of it in the liquid form right now, but bitters or, liver teas and things like that to support the liver function. And then B12 is produced by your microbes in your gut. So it isn't something that you just get from your food, right? So you want to make sure that how are my microbes? But the microbial health isn't all about taking probiotics. In fact, I see a lot of clients that have been taking probiotics that's doing nothing or make them bloaty because they're not digesting at the upper GIs. So at some point, I will do a program on supporting the upper GIs, so that we're not just throwing, people saying, okay, take this, take that. So this goes to the next thing that I wanted to address today, and I'll pause after this. It's about vitamin D again. Vitamin D just keeps coming into my realm, so I wanted to talk about it. And the reason why I constantly get no on a lot of people with vitamin D is because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So if you're not digesting fats and your liver is under functioning, and then you have sludgy gallbladder, I mean, not gallbladder, but the bile, then you're not going to emulsify. You're not going to basically absorb the vitamin D that you're taking. So you have to remember, when you go see a doctor and then they do a blood test and says, oh, you have a very low vitamin D level, you can stop by some store and get vitamin D on the way home and start taking 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. That's where I intuitively, when I test people, I get no on. That's because that is just putting a Band-Aid on, and it's not going to do anything, because if you're not digesting the fats, how are you supposed to digest the vitamin D, which is fat soluble vitamin? That goes for vitamin A, that goes for vitamin E, that goes for vitamin K. So this is where I think the frustrations for me builds up. It's that we're just looking at blood tests and saying blood test shows this, therefore I just need to do that. Blood test shows that it's too high, so I just need to not take that. It's not like that. Body doesn't work like that. If it worked like that, like a lever, goes push forward and pull back, like you just need a little bit, or no, just a little less, or you do it or you don't. It doesn't work in that kind of a yes no world. So please be careful when you are you're taking vitamin D, is to always check in, how's my liver? Am I digesting fats? So that's a key. So I will pause there for a moment. Anything, Chris? And that's why we come back and ask you. Oh, hey, Joanne, thank you. So, please don't stop taking the folate, but I would look for methylfolate because at least then it's methylated, so it'd be easier for you to convert that. It's somewhat converted, so it'd be easier for your body to absorb. But I would definitely request your doctor, medical doctor, to do a MTHFR testing and then see if you have that gene mutation. And if that's the case, you need to take, no big deal, you just need to take more of a methylated form of B vitamins. And certain B vitamins you're not going to do as well with, and so on and so forth. But that's where we could get a little bit more clarity. Okay. All right. Chris?
So what I have to say is that if any of you have the sensation that your head is spinning, talking about all these supplements, which is possible because there's a lot of nuance when we start to talk about these things, I want to remind you, kind of like what I said before about having these very small goals. When you're trying to balance out your health or trying to find the right approach for your body, you have to start very simply. And sometimes this isn't very satisfying to our minds, because you might remember I've mentioned this before, this quote from Inayat Khan, who talks about the mind loves a puzzle. And basically, the more complexity there is, the more interesting it is. And, truth doesn't really matter so much because truth is often very simple. So it's not that interesting to the mind, but complexity and all the excitement of running around the maze of chasing down all these gene tests and supplements. I mean, sure, those are tools that we can use. But if you are confused and you're stuck and you're not really sure what to do next, start with the most basic things. Okay. How are you digesting in your stomach, for example? Are you hydrating yourself every day? These kinds of topics, we have to come back to every single person. 100% of people have to pass this low bar hurdle before really getting on to the more complex topics, because that's just how our systems work. If we're not taking care of this most basic level of function, we can't really expect to see the fine level clearly. I hope that makes sense. If it's like if you take a jar full of muddy water, you've probably heard this analogy somewhere before. You can have clear water and mud settled at the bottom, but if you shake it up, same contents are in there, but you can't really distinguish any of them. You just have brown. And so that's kind of how it is when we are trying to scramble around looking for answers with just more and more information coming from all these different directions, Dr. Google being foremost for many of us. So I would just encourage you to slow down your speed and cut out the number of things down to a very small and simple number of things that you are going to work on, just like those small goals I mentioned. Okay. And like Masami mentioned, when you're getting to these level of supplements, for it to really benefit you, you need to have already been working on the basic things for a while. Okay. For my case, it took years, and I'm not exaggerating. It took me many, many years to do things like eat a clean and nutrient dense diet long enough that my body could regain enough energy to start doing things like removing toxic metals and repairing scar tissues and repairing the energy levels in my cells. All of those things require time because it took time to build up the patterns that created the situation in the first place. So I want to just reiterate that it's such an important piece and it cannot be overstated.
Yeah, I think we will need to create a course that it's basic, because I feel, and in this analogy, many of you have heard me talk about this if you've done my privates, is that when I hear a list of supplements or even the blood tests and what's been given to you, I feel like those are decorations for your house. So taking any fat soluble vitamins, even water soluble vitamins like vitamin C, or even any of the B vitamins, or CoQ10, or any fish oil, any probiotics. Those are decorations for your house. So you have to have foundations first, but the foundations are about how are you digesting at the upper GIs. So it's your stomach, and how are you doing with your pancreas, and how are you doing with your liver and gallbladder. Those are my main that I focus on, because if those are not working, you can't absorb anything. I mean, even this morning I had a client that had been to so many people, literally frustrated, breaking down on the call. And, not because of she hadn't tried. She's tried so many things, but not a single doctor addressed her digestion and kept giving her more things to take. But if you can't digest, what is the point of taking more supplements? They have to be digested. So I hope that makes sense. And I think using enzymes, using hydrochloric acid, supporting your, liver and gallbladder are going to be the key to working through some of these questions. And let's see, I just wanted to mention, I wanted to quickly just talk about autonomic nervous system. I know it's at the top of the hour, so I don't want to go into a huge amount, but I just wanted to tell you it's my personal thing that's been going on. So I've had a lot of physical pain in the last couple of weeks, and it's been really hard for me to breathe fully and toss and turn while sleeping, because I have like these nerve ending pains are excruciating. And I have a lot of fascial tightness, and I will be talking about fascia in my 7 weeks course much more, because I'm passionate about fascia too. But what I realized is that no amount of massage, no amount of acupuncture, or no amount of adjustments were going to work for me until I balanced my autonomic nervous system. So because December and January had been so intense in terms of my work with creating this course, that I flipped my nervous system to fight or flight. And I knew that, but I just had to keep going in some way. So I did keep going. And now my nerve endings are freaking out. So last night, I finally just took some time for myself, and I did some parasympathetic nervous system work. I did some autonomic nervous system balancing, which I will teach many of you. I mean, if you're taking my course, I will definitely teach you this. Then my neck started to move. My pain went from almost 9 or even close to 10, I would say, to down to about 2. So within literally about 10 minutes of working on my nervous system. So I just wanted to tell you that sometimes it isn't about more massages. It isn't about lacking in movements. Maybe that has something to do with it. But for me, it was my nervous system. If I didn't slow and switch my nervous system and quiet down my fire in my brain, I was always going to feel the pain. So I just wanted to share that quickly about that. And I think the last thing I just wanted to mention, Chris, do you have anything else to add?
I have one last thing I might like to say, but I'll wait till you go through your last one.
Oh, no, I think the last one is just more of an announcement, but we now are going to be able to do the hair tissue mineral analysis in Europe. Is that Europe or just UK?
Well, it's based in the UK, but I do believe they ship the test kits to Europe.
Okay, so yeah, if you're interested in doing a HTMA session with me, with the test and the 90-minute session with me, we can do that. I can do that for people in Europe as well. So that's super exciting. And I have my the live interview with the Shift Network on the 11th. So that's this Thursday. And so if you are around, please come and join and listen to that. All that kind of information should be sent from the Shift Network, but you can also go to my course page and then check it out. So I just wanted to mention that. Anything else?
No, I don't have any other content, but there's a quote that has been kicking around in my head, and it has to do with something which is it's a bigger topic, and we'll revisit it at some point. But it's the idea of agreement versus commitment, and this is an important topic when we're talking about how to navigate change. And so I just want to set it up by saying agreement is something that you get when you're sitting with a group of like-minded people and everyone starts to nod their head. Oh, yes, 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 I think so. Yes. Oh, you think so? Yes, so do I. Okay. Yes. Very, very good. Very good. Okay. So agreement's very easy to do because it doesn't require anything of us. Commitment, on the other hand, now that's where things get a little dicey. That's where something is being asked. There's action that has to follow, but it makes all the difference. And so what I want to challenge everybody to take away from today, we've been talking about courage and we've been talking about other topics which ultimately require courage to really make them effective. So I want you to just pay attention in your life around you. See if you can notice when those two things are playing out. The agreement, is it agreement or commitment? Are you just merely saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yes, I can see how that could help someone at some time. Versus, I am going to take the following steps at the following times for X number of days or weeks. That's a commitment, something you can track and measure and look back on and see that you did. Okay. So I would encourage you to take more opportunities to commit, because just like Wolfgang von Goethe said, the German romantic writer, he said, at the moment of commitment, the entire universe conspires to assist you. And that's an important thing. He didn't accidentally say that. Okay. And he's somebody that who knew something about this. Okay. At the moment of commitment, the entire universe conspires to assist you. But that means that you have the key in your own hand. So you need to use the key that's already there. Right? That's
Love
all
it. Love it. And then semi funny, but Chris, will you just paraphrase what the email that I received recently from somebody? Just
well, this could be a lot of somebody's, because it's human nature. Okay, it's we often get messages from people who are on the agreement side of that conversation that I just mentioned, and they'll be pretty positive actually, but the email will come across something like this: I'm very much looking forward to eventually trying at some point the suggestions that you've recommended eventually. And if you can kind of hear the kicking the can down the road in that statement, this is where I want you to look at yourself, and just because I know I've done this before. So anytime we use the word try, that's probably a red flag. Because if we're trying to do it, we're probably not doing it. We're still navigating to the start line. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, someday I'm really looking forward to trying what you're eventually telling me I should do soon. Someday, I hope, maybe.
Well, I mean, so I think that's the agreement and, commitment.
Exactly.
The person agrees that what I recommended sounded really good, and eventually we'll get to where when the star systems line up, and when the spring flowers come out, and then maybe I don't know, they win the lottery tickets, and then maybe they will start to think about, possibly start to think about what I've recommended. And seriously, you won't believe how many emails like this I received. And so it's like, if not now, when? Really? If not now, what is the point? You can, like I keep saying, you only breathe for this moment. So you know what? Maybe just do it. Nike did it correctly. Okay. Just do it. Like, just commit. So
I want to just say one last thing about Masami, which is one of the reasons that Masami is so good at what she does is because she is the I don't know if it's even the kind of person, but she is a person that will learn something and immediately implement it. I am not that kind of person, and I freely admit that. I tend to be stubborn. I tend to drag my feet. I tend to try to understand what's going on a little bit more before making the commitment. Sometimes it's taken me years to do something that Masami had been doing from the moment she learned about it. I've gotten better, but I can tell you that that makes all the difference in your own experience, is to just cross over that line from trying or thinking about it to just stepping into it. And I'm speaking as one of the recalcitrants. Okay, I'm firmly in that camp a lot of the time. Not so much anymore, but.
Well, so I guess I'm going to plug in. So if you haven't committed and you've been kind of agreeing with what my 7 weeks course is going to be like, that sounds really interesting. You know what? Commit. Join me and join Chris, because he's going to be teaching on the 7th module. He will be too. So please commit and show up. And then we just create that kind of energy, because I want to work with people who are ready and says, I'm ready. You know what? I've been to 15 different things. I've done this and this and that, and I'm ready. That's who I want to work with. So, and yes, Chris is right. It took him a decade just to like eat differently. I've been telling him, stop eating the way you are, and then he didn't for what, 10 years?
We'll save that for another day. That's a little bit of a
But
story.
no, he's doing much better now. Thank God. So, all right. So we've all been there, but you know what? I truly believe life is short. I do. I do. And do you have the Zen quote right there that you could read that my teacher gave me on the right there?
Yeah, if you can hang on.
Yeah, and then we'll wrap up, everyone. I know it's like last thing, but this is a Zen, my Zen teacher gave it to me on my very first journey with him. Very first day. Will you read it to us?
It's actually framed, so I'm going to read it off of this. Okay. So it's from one of the evening teachings that this monastery gives. And it says, "Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed. Do not squander your life."
Thank you. So let's not. And take your breath and know that there's a beginning, middle, and end with each breath. Then you know not to go too fast, okay? Let it stop, let it end, okay? So many of us take a next breath before it has ended, okay? So make sure you do the beginning, middle, and the end with your breaths, please. All right, so for Monday, we will be back next week, and then I'm actually planning on taking maybe a couple Mondays off so that I can devote my work to the 7B course. But we'll be back next Monday, and I think it'll be Valentine's Day before we see you. So happy Valentine's Day. Love to all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.